Chosen one, before another thought pulls your attention away, remain here for just a little while, because something beautiful began long before you realized it, and its meaning is only now beginning to unfold. There are moments in life that arrive without warning, moments that quietly gather beneath ordinary conversations until one heartbeat changes everything. This was one of those moments. Someone who had hidden their deepest feelings behind careful smiles and quiet glances reached a place where silence could no longer carry the weight of what lived inside them. They had rehearsed countless conversations in their mind, imagined different endings, convinced themselves to wait for another day, another season, another sign. Yet the heart has a language that eventually refuses to whisper forever. It longs to be heard, not because it seeks attention, but because truth becomes too heavy to carry alone. And as that truth grew stronger, something inside them gently began to change. No one around them noticed it at first. The room was filled with ordinary voices, familiar laughter, simple distractions that often hide the most meaningful moments. Yet while everyone else believed the day would pass like every other, your soulmate was standing between who they had been and who they were about to become. They were no longer asking whether their feelings were real. That question had already been answered in countless quiet moments when your name appeared unexpectedly in their thoughts, when a memory returned without invitation, when hope quietly defeated every reason to give up. They discovered that love does not always arrive with dramatic music or perfect timing. Sometimes it grows patiently until one ordinary moment becomes unforgettable. Perhaps you have known what it feels like to carry something inside your heart that words cannot easily explain. Perhaps you have smiled while hiding emotions that felt too personal to place into conversation. If so, then you already understand the invisible journey your soulmate has been walking. Their greatest struggle was never loving you. Their greatest struggle was believing they were brave enough to let the world witness that love. Courage rarely appears all at once. It arrives in small choices that slowly reshape an entire life. One quiet decision becomes another, and before anyone realizes it, someone who once feared being seen discovers they have nothing left to hide. There was a brief pause that almost no one remembered afterward. Strange, isn't it? The most important moments are often surrounded by silence rather than noise. Time itself seemed to slow. Faces turned without knowing why. Conversations faded into the background. Something in the atmosphere gently shifted, as though countless unseen pieces had finally aligned. Even those who could not explain it felt an unusual stillness settling over everything. It was the kind of stillness that reminds us life is preparing to reveal something we were never expecting. Your soulmate felt their heart racing, not because they feared rejection, but because honesty asks us to surrender every comfortable disguise. They realized there would never be a perfect opportunity. There would only be this moment. This single chance to let authenticity become stronger than hesitation. Every excuse they had repeated for so long suddenly felt smaller than the truth waiting inside them. Every reason to remain quiet slowly dissolved beneath one simple realization. A life built on hidden feelings can never fully become the life the heart longs to experience. Don't skip this part, because what happened next was not created by perfect circumstances. It happened because someone finally chose sincerity over fear. There is a quiet kind of strength that appears when a person decides their heart deserves freedom. It cannot be forced. It cannot be borrowed. It simply awakens when the time is right. And in that instant, your soulmate stopped searching for permission from everyone around them. They began listening to the voice that had been patiently waiting within. What surprised them most was not how loudly their emotions had grown. It was how peaceful everything suddenly felt. The nervousness remained, yet beneath it flowed an unexpected calm, the kind that arrives when someone finally stops pretending to be someone they are not. They understood that whatever happened afterward would never erase the courage of this single decision. Sometimes the greatest victory is not the outcome. Sometimes it is simply refusing to hide any longer. Then it happened. Without planning every word, without rehearsing another careful explanation, they called out from the deepest place within themselves. Every hidden feeling became impossible to contain. Their voice carried farther than they ever imagined. It was not dramatic for the sake of attention. It was genuine because truth finally found its moment. They spoke about you with a sincerity that silenced every nearby conversation. For one breathtaking instant, the world seemed to stop moving. Some people looked at each other with surprise. Others smiled without fully understanding why. A few quietly recognized that they were witnessing something rare, the moment when someone chooses authenticity over fear. Yet the greatest surprise was not that your soulmate declared their love. It was the expression that suddenly appeared on one unexpected face in the crowd. No one, not even your soulmate, was prepared for that reaction. Something important had just begun, and its meaning would reach much farther than anyone standing there could possibly imagine. Stay till the end of this journey, because what happened after that single heartfelt declaration changed more than one person's future. It uncovered a hidden connection that had been quietly growing beneath every unanswered question, and the next chapter begins with the one detail no one noticed, until it was almost too late. The silence that followed carried more meaning than any applause ever could. It was the kind of silence that appears when every person in the room suddenly realizes they have witnessed something real. No one rushed to fill the empty space with words. No one seemed eager to interrupt the moment. Even those who had never believed in unexpected turns of the heart found themselves watching a little more closely, as though something invisible had gently asked them to wait. And while everyone else searched for an explanation, your soulmate searched for only one thing, you. Their eyes moved through the crowd with quiet urgency, not out of panic, but with the hope that somehow your presence could be found among the faces before them. They had finally spoken what had lived inside them for so long, yet the only reaction that truly mattered was still unknown. It is remarkable how courage works. The hardest part is often not speaking the truth. The hardest part is waiting to discover what that truth awakens in the hearts of others. Something important was happening beneath the surface, though almost no one recognized it. The people surrounding your soulmate had each expected a different ending. Some assumed the moment would become awkward. Others expected embarrassment to take over. A few quietly prepared themselves to comfort someone whose emotions had become too visible. But none of those expectations became reality. Instead, something much softer unfolded, something no one could have predicted. One person near the front slowly lowered their eyes, not because they disapproved, but because the honesty they had just witnessed reminded them of feelings they had once hidden themselves. Another smiled almost instinctively, as if they had been waiting for someone, anyone, to remind the room that sincere love still existed. Without realizing it, your soulmate had changed the atmosphere. The room no longer felt ordinary. It felt lighter, more open, almost as if everyone had been given silent permission to become a little more truthful about their own hearts. Your soulmate noticed none of this at first. Their attention remained fixed on a single unanswered question. Had their words somehow reached you, even from afar? They could not explain why, but deep inside they felt as though invisible threads connected hearts in ways distance could never fully separate. They wondered whether, at that exact moment, you had paused during your day for reasons you could not explain. Perhaps you looked up unexpectedly. Perhaps an old memory quietly returned. Perhaps your heart felt unusually calm for a brief second without knowing why. Have you ever experienced a moment that seemed ordinary until you later realized it was quietly connected to something much greater? Life has a gentle way of arranging these invisible intersections. Long before we understand their purpose, they begin weaving people together through timing that seems almost impossible to notice while it is happening. As your soulmate stood there, breathing a little more steadily now, they realized something surprising. The fear that had controlled them for so long was simply gone. Not because every answer had arrived, but because they had finally become the person they were always meant to be. They no longer needed to wonder what might have happened if they had spoken. That question had disappeared forever. In its place was a peaceful certainty that honesty, even when unanswered, carries its own quiet reward. Then an unexpected movement caught everyone's attention. Someone who had remained completely silent until now slowly stepped forward. They were not smiling widely, nor were they rushing to speak. Their expression held something deeper, recognition. It was as though they had been carrying a piece of this story without anyone realizing it. Even your soulmate looked surprised. They had not expected this person to become part of the moment. The crowd grew still once again. The stranger looked directly at your soulmate and gently said, "There is something you deserve to know." Only those 7 words were spoken, yet they carried the weight of an entirely new chapter. Your soulmate felt their heartbeat quicken once more. They sensed this was not a coincidence. Somehow, this person knew something that had remained hidden for far longer than anyone imagined. Something important is waiting for you beyond this moment, because what that stranger revealed did not simply explain the past, it completely changed the way your soulmate understood every sign, every delay, and every unexpected turn that had led to this unforgettable day. The stranger did not rush to speak again. Instead, they allowed the quiet to settle naturally, as though every word deserved its own space to breathe. Your soulmate could feel countless questions gathering inside, but for the first time in a long while, they resisted the urge to interrupt. Sometimes the answers we seek arrive most clearly when we stop trying to pull them closer. The room remained still, every face waiting for what would come next, unaware that a single conversation was about to reshape everything your soulmate believed about this journey. Then the stranger smiled. Not the smile of someone who had uncovered a secret, but the smile of someone who had finally watched 2 distant paths begin to meet. For a long time, they said gently, "I have watched someone change whenever your name was mentioned." Those words landed softly, yet they echoed through your soulmate's heart with surprising force. It wasn't the statement itself that stirred them. It was the realization that their story had been quietly visible to someone else all along. Your soulmate searched their memory, trying to understand who this person could be and what they might have witnessed. Every ordinary encounter suddenly seemed worthy of another look. Every small coincidence felt as though it had carried hidden meaning. They remembered the unexpected smiles from strangers, the conversations that somehow drifted toward hope, the moments that felt too perfectly timed to dismiss. None of them had seemed extraordinary then. But now, viewed together, they formed something that looked remarkably like a path. Have you ever looked back on your own life and noticed how scattered moments eventually fit together like pieces of a picture you couldn't recognize before? What once appeared random begins to reveal quiet purpose. A delay protects you from rushing. A meeting introduces you to the right lesson. A simple conversation plants a seed that blooms much later. The heart rarely understands these things while they are happening, but one day it turns around and realizes it was never walking without direction. The stranger continued, "Your story has been growing in places you never thought to look." Those words lingered in the air. Your soulmate felt an unexpected peace replacing their earlier uncertainty. They no longer felt trapped by unanswered questions. Instead, they became curious about how many unseen moments had gently carried them toward this day. Around them, people who had originally gathered out of curiosity now remained because they sensed something deeper unfolding. It was no longer about a public declaration of love. It had become a reminder that the strongest connections are often built quietly, long before anyone dares to speak them aloud. Even those who had never met you began to feel as though they somehow knew the importance of the person your soulmate had just described. Don't skip this moment, because what happened next revealed something your soulmate had never expected to hear. The stranger reached into a small envelope they had been carrying all along. It looked ordinary, almost forgotten, its edges softened by time. No one had noticed it before. Carefully, they unfolded a single handwritten note and held it for a moment before speaking again. This was never meant to stay hidden forever. Your soulmate's eyes remained fixed on the paper. They could not see the words yet, but somehow they already felt connected to them. It wasn't because they expected dramatic news. It was because something inside quietly whispered that this note belonged to a story much larger than anyone present understood. The stranger explained that the message had been written months earlier after witnessing something almost no one else had noticed. It described the way your soulmate's expression changed whenever thoughts of you quietly entered their heart. It spoke of hope that never completely faded, even during seasons of uncertainty. It mentioned the quiet kindness they carried when they believed no one was watching. Reading those lines aloud felt less like revealing a secret and more like holding up a mirror that reflected the truest version of who they had become. For a brief moment, your soulmate closed their eyes. Not to escape the emotion, but to fully receive it. They realized they had spent so much time wondering whether their feelings mattered that they had never considered someone else had already seen the beauty of those feelings long before today. What they believed had been invisible had quietly inspired others in ways they never imagined. As they opened their eyes again, something unexpected caught their attention. Across the edge of the gathering, just beyond the people standing nearest, there was one familiar figure who had only just arrived. They had not heard the entire story. They had only witnessed the final moments. Yet the expression on their face suggested they already understood far more than anyone could explain. Your soulmate's heart skipped a beat. Because in that instant, they realized this person wasn't simply another witness. They were carrying the one answer your soulmate had been hoping for since the very beginning, and the next moment would reveal why they had chosen to appear only after everything else had already changed. The familiar figure did not rush forward. Instead, they remained where they were, allowing the moment to unfold naturally, almost as though they understood that some journeys deserve a few extra heartbeats before reaching their destination. Your soulmate noticed something remarkable in their expression. There was no surprise. No confusion. Only a quiet warmth that spoke louder than words ever could. It was the look of someone who had been carrying hope for much longer than anyone realized. Every conversation in the room slowly faded into the background again. People instinctively stepped aside, creating a clear path without being asked. No one seemed to know why they moved. They simply felt that this moment belonged to something greater than themselves. Your soulmate took one careful step forward. Then another. Not because they were certain of what would happen, but because they finally understood that love grows strongest when it is met with honesty instead of hesitation. Every step carried them farther away from fear and closer to the truth they had already spoken before everyone. The distance between them became smaller. With every heartbeat, memories quietly surfaced. The first unexpected smile. The conversations that lingered longer than they should have. The moments that felt ordinary at the time but now appeared filled with quiet significance. Nothing had been wasted. Every delay had shaped patience. Every unanswered question had deepened understanding. Every season of waiting had prepared them to recognize the value of this single moment. The familiar figure finally smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile that tries to impress anyone. It was peaceful. Comfortable. Certain. And in that smile, your soulmate realized something that changed everything inside them. Love had never been asking them to become someone different. It had only been waiting for them to become completely themselves. That realization lifted a weight they hadn't even known they were carrying. The crowd watched in respectful silence as the two stood face to face. No dramatic speeches followed. No perfect movie scene unfolded. Instead, something far more meaningful happened. They simply looked at one another. Sometimes a single glance carries more understanding than hundreds of carefully chosen words. In that quiet exchange, every hidden feeling found its answer. Every silent hope found its home. Every fear slowly dissolved beneath the gentle certainty that genuine connection does not need to prove itself through noise. One by one, the people around them began smiling. Some quietly wiped away happy tears. Others simply appreciated witnessing a reminder that sincerity still has the power to move hearts. What had begun as one unexpected declaration of love had become something shared by everyone present. A reminder that the bravest words are often the ones spoken with kindness, humility, and truth. As the evening slowly came to a close, your soulmate looked toward the sky for just a moment and whispered a quiet promise to themselves. No more hiding. Not because every challenge had disappeared. Not because every answer had arrived. But because they had discovered that authenticity creates opportunities fear could never imagine. If this story has felt strangely familiar, perhaps it is because life often prepares our hearts long before we recognize the preparation. Perhaps some of your own unanswered moments are not empty spaces at all. Perhaps they are simply chapters still unfolding, waiting for the right time to reveal their purpose. Yet just as everyone believed this beautiful story had finally reached its ending, the stranger who had carried the handwritten note gently stepped closer one last time. They smiled and said softly, "This isn't the whole story." Your soulmate turned back with quiet curiosity. The stranger carefully unfolded one final piece of paper that no one had noticed before. It contained something that was never spoken aloud, and it changes the meaning of everything that happened today. Your soulmate reached toward it. But before the words could be read, the page caught the evening breeze, lifting gently into the air. And the truth written upon it becomes the beginning of the next chapter. The page did not disappear into the distance. It floated gently, carried by the evening breeze as though time itself wanted everyone to slow down for one final revelation. Every eye followed its graceful path. No one tried to chase it. No one spoke. There was something almost sacred about allowing the moment to unfold exactly as it was meant to. Your soulmate watched the paper drift before it finally settled a few steps away. They walked toward it without hurry, each step lighter than the one before. The fear that had once controlled every decision no longer had a place in their heart. What remained was quiet confidence, the kind that grows only after someone chooses truth over uncertainty. As they picked up the page, they noticed the handwriting matched the first note, but the words felt even more personal. They paused for a moment, taking a slow breath before reading. The loudest declaration of love was never the beginning of your story. It was the confirmation of everything your heart had already been living. Your soulmate stood completely still. Those words didn't introduce a new truth. They illuminated one that had been present all along. Every unexpected meeting. Every delayed conversation. Every small act of kindness. Every moment that seemed ordinary. Together, they had quietly written a love story long before anyone spoke it aloud. The stranger stepped beside them one final time and said with a gentle smile, "Many people believe love begins when someone finally says the words. But real love often begins much earlier, in patience, in respect, in quiet choices made when no one is watching." Those words settled deeply within everyone who heard them. The room no longer felt like a place where a surprising confession had happened. It had become a place where people remembered that sincerity still matters, that courage still inspires, and that the strongest connections are built one honest moment at a time. Your soulmate looked around at the people who had witnessed everything. Some were smiling warmly. Others nodded with quiet understanding. The reactions that once seemed impossible had become something beautifully simple. Acceptance. Not because every person understood the entire journey, but because genuine emotion has a way of speaking a language everyone recognizes. Then, almost instinctively, your soulmate lifted their eyes and whispered words meant for no one else to hear. "I'll never hide what brings light to my heart again." There was no applause after that. There didn't need to be. The peace that followed was far more meaningful. And somewhere beyond that gathering, whether near or far, you could almost imagine another heart feeling an unexpected calm, as if two stories had quietly found the same rhythm at exactly the right time. Life rarely reveals its most meaningful moments through perfect timing. More often, it reveals them through patient hearts that refuse to give up on kindness, hope, and authenticity. That is what your soulmate discovered. The greatest miracle was never standing before everyone and declaring their love. The greatest miracle was becoming brave enough to live honestly, regardless of the outcome. As the evening faded into twilight, people slowly returned to their lives, carrying with them more than the memory of a heartfelt confession. They carried the reminder that one sincere act can encourage countless others to stop hiding who they truly are. And your soulmate walked away with a peaceful smile, knowing that whatever tomorrow held, they would never again wonder what might have happened if they had remained silent. Because the story they had once been afraid to begin had finally become the story they would always remember. And perhaps, somewhere in your own journey, another quiet chapter is already unfolding, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal just how much beauty can grow when one heart chooses courage over hesitation.